We buried my husband's twin brother, but exactly midnight that very night we buried him. Something that sounded exactly like him came calling. When we checked through the peephole, what we saw was truly chilling. Story time. My husband lost his twin brother. He came to live with us for a while because he was looking for a job. He said we tried to help him, he couldn't find a job, but eventually we found him something. The pay wasn't that great, but before that he went into a state of depression, but even that he was able to come out of it. Everything was going well, so we thought. He was lively, happy, he would go to work, he always returned back home. He's someone that doesn't really go out a lot. He has certain places he likes to go. Apparently these places bring him peace. But then one morning he left for work and he never returned back. This is unusual. This is not like him. This is out of character for him. Myself and husband were worried. We rang his phone, we couldn't get hold of him. We texted him, we couldn't get hold of him. We rang people that knew him, we couldn't get hold of him. No one knew his whereabouts. We checked out places that he likes to visit all the time, places that he normally goes to, but we could not find him anywhere. We rang his workplace, but they said that he left when his shift was over. This started to worry us. And then the next day, we got a phone call from the police. They asked my husband to come and identify his brother's body. When we went, it was truly him. They could not find the cause of death. This was very alarming. This was very scary. It wasn't like he was sick. It wasn't like someone attacked him. Well, we don't really know. But this was very devastating. They arranged a funeral and a burial. We buried him, but that very day, on his burial day, it rained like never before. We had so much thunder and lightning like never seen before. This was very scary, but then it stopped and we're able to bury him. But then after that, it carried on raining very heavily into the night. People were coming and going, and then at midnight, we heard a knock. At first, my husband thought it was just someone who came to pay respect. I told him that it's too late to be opening or having visitors at this time, so just leave it till the next day. But then the knock kept coming. My husband said he was going to go check, and I said to him that no, it's not a good idea. But then when he went to open the front door, he could hear a very familiar voice, and that was the same voice of his brother, his twin brother that we had just buried that afternoon. He called me and said, maybe he's grieving and he's hearing things. I should come and listen to this. When I got closer, I could hear his late brother's voice. We panicked. We didn't know what to do. My husband gathered the courage. He went and checked, and truly, he saw his late brother that we had just buried that afternoon stood there in the same clothes at the front door. We were shocked. This brought chills, and we did not know what to do. We could not even sleep. The next day, when we opened the door, tell us why we saw muddy footprints outside the door. Also, something that wasn't right. One of his favorite necklaces that he used to wear, which we buried him, was left right in front of our front door. So who the hell did we bury? People, things are happening.
She saw two men walk into a neighborhood, one holding a briefcase and the other holding what looked to be a body bag. If you're new here, I'm Krista, and on my account we tell spooky stories that I either find on the internet or that are submitted to me. My name is Ellie, and I live in a small town in Texas. It's actually a pretty busy town for how small it is, and nothing creepy or paranormal usually happens here. I'm not even sure if what happened to me was paranormal, but it was definitely one of the creepiest experiences I've ever had. I was about 13 years old at the time, and honestly, I was a pretty misbehaved kid. I had a friend, we'll call him Jake, and for months we had been sneaking out almost every night without getting caught. One night, we met up at the end of my street like we always did. But right away, we both said the same thing. We had a really uneasy feeling. We kept telling each other it felt like something bad was going to happen, but we brushed it off. The worst thing that had happened to us before was almost getting kidnapped once, so we figured we were just being paranoid. Across the street from where I lived, there was a suburban neighborhood with a small park and some woods nearby. We decided to walk over there and hang out at the park. We were there for about 10 or 15 minutes when Jake suddenly got a call. It was his mom. She told him she was coming to get him and that he wasn't allowed to sneak out again. Jake didn't want to leave me walking home alone, so he tried to convince me to come with him so his mom could drive me home. We only lived about a street away from each other. But I didn't want his mom to think I was a bad influence, and she didn't even know I was there. So Jake left and I stayed behind. Almost immediately, that uneasy feeling came back, but this time it was much stronger. I started walking toward the entrance of the neighborhood so I could head back home. But the closer I got to the entrance, the worse the feeling became. For some reason, I sat down near the trees by the entrance of the neighborhood. That's when everything suddenly felt different. I looked up and saw two very tall men walking into the neighborhood. At least, they looked like men. They almost looked like shadows. One of them was carrying a briefcase. The other was carrying something that looked like a body bag. I froze. The houses near the entrance of the neighborhood, the ones that usually all look different, suddenly looked identical to each other. It was like everything had changed. The two men walked up in front of the houses and exchanged what they were holding. Then they walked up onto one of the porches and disappeared. Not walked inside, they literally vanished. At that point, I started freaking out. I called Jake and told him everything I had just seen. He said he would try to sneak back out and come meet me. While I was walking home, I kept hearing footsteps behind me the entire way. I tried to ignore it, but eventually I turned around. And there was this tall, dark figure walking behind me at a steady pace. I immediately started walking faster. My house was only 5 or 10 minutes away, and I just wanted to get inside. When I finally got to my yard, I started climbing over the 6-foot fence we had in the backyard. Right as I was about to jump down on the other side, I felt something touch the bottom of my foot. I spun around, but there was nothing there. I tried to brush it off and ran inside through the back door. I went straight to my room and laid down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. You know that feeling when you just know someone is in the same room as you? That's exactly how it felt. Eventually, I fell asleep, trying to convince myself that everything that had happened was just my imagination. But about 2 hours later, I suddenly woke up to the feeling of someone choking me. I started gasping for air, and then the pressure suddenly stopped. I was completely shaken and couldn't go back to sleep for the rest of the night. I never told my parents what happened. I mean, what was I supposed to say? That I snuck out and saw something terrifying? Jake and I almost never talk about that night anymore. It still freaks both of us out. But one thing is for sure, that was the last time I ever ignored my gut feeling. I have so many questions, like between the fact that the two men disappeared, also the houses suddenly looked different. I'm so confused. Like this was almost like a paranormal glitch in the Matrix type experience, like all in one, which is really interesting. If you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can. And I will see you in the next one.
So growing up, did your parents ever tell you to stay away from swamps and the woods when you're by yourself? Because now that I got your attention with this cute baby goat, I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me when I was out in the woods by myself when I was a little kid. The story actually takes place when I was a little kid, and it was me and my family, and we went camping in the Appalachian Mountain. Now mind you, my parents always told us to stay away from this swamp because it was just unsafe in general, and you could literally fall in and sink up to your neck and possibly drown. Here's them together, by the way. But okay, back to me. I was being my typical self where I was catching animals and stuff and snakes down at the lake, and I decided to go take a little adventure over to this swamp. And I actually got a thrill out of my parents telling me to stay away from it because I was a little rebel child. I remember going through the woods and I started hearing this weird noise. It almost sounded like when you're a kid and you don't understand that a mountain lion sounds like a woman screaming for her life in the middle of the mountains. It sounded almost like that, but it was definitely more of like a deeper, growling kind of scream. At that age, you would think a little kid would turn around and run, but like I said, I was always looking for trouble, so I decided to go even further towards this swamp. As I followed the noise, I start coming across these tracks in the ground that were like, I can't explain it. They just were not human-like, but they were almost like, I can't explain it. They weren't human, but they were almost like a dog or like a deer. Kind of like if deer hooves had paw prints mixed in it. But at that point I was hooked, so I decided to follow these tracks through the brush over to the swamp. And I remember swiping away the leaves to enter the swamp, and this is what I saw. All I can tell you is I've seen some weird animals in my life, but I have never in my life seen something that was kind of like a deer, but like not a deer. All I can say is this thing was really tall. It was drinking water out of the swamp, and then when it noticed me and it picked up its head, this thing was really tall, and it just had this like a kind of like a gremlin, like goat face. It had that weird face, but it also had typical deer antlers as well. All I can tell you is that when it noticed me and we locked eyes, this thing just did this really creepy, like almost like a smile per se. When this thing smiled, it had like really sharp teeth, almost like a wolf or something. And that was when I turned around and I booked it through the woods. As I'm running and screaming on the way back to my parents, you can literally hear the sound of footsteps behind me, like this thing was catching up to me. I literally was running and screaming all the way back to our campsite, and my parents finally found me and they were trying to calm me down. Until this day, they will never believe me when I told them what it was. But if you guys have any similar experiences, please put them down in the comments and follow for more scary stories of my life.
We've all heard of the exorcism of Emily Rose, but have you heard of the story of Latoya Ammons and what happened to her family. Guys, this story is so freaking crazy and it's been well documented. It actually happened and I don't know why I have only heard about it recently. So I'm going to share it with you. A lot of you probably have heard of it before, but if you're like me living under a rock, you're welcome. This is nearly 800 pages of official government documentation, police reports, medical records, and Department of Child Services case files. A Catholic priest and a police chief with 36 years on the force who started out thinking this family was lying and turned into a complete believer. This is the story of Latoya Ammons and the house at 3860 Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana. That's Latoya and her house. November 2011, Latoya, a single mother, moves into this rental home. Along with Latoya, moved in her mother, Rosa Campbell, and Latoya's 3 children, ages 7, 9, and 12. It looks like a completely normal house on a completely normal street. It was not. Within days, despite the fact that it was freezing outside in December, all of a sudden, massive black flies began swarming their screened-in porch. So they unalived the flies, and they just kept coming back over and over again. And then came the footsteps on the basement stairs late at night, thumping up the steps. Nobody was down there, but there was just something climbing up towards the door. And the basement and kitchen door would creak open slowly on their own over and over again, despite the fact that they even started locking them. One night, Rosa saw a shadowy figure of a man pacing swiftly back and forth in the living room, wet boot prints trailing through the room in his path, and then it was gone. And then, over the next several months, the children began to change. There were moments where their eyes would bulge and their voices would drop low and guttural. These voices were not of their own. And then they would spread evil grins wide, too wide across their faces. The 7-year-old child started sitting alone in their closet, seemingly talking to someone that wasn't there, claiming that a presence was there, describing to them in detail what it felt like to be unalived. The 12-year-old needed stitches after being struck by a headboard. She also told her mother a voice would tell her she would never see her family again, and a moment when this voice told her that she would not be alive in 20 minutes. And on March 10th, 2012, at roughly 2 a.m., Rosa walked into her bedroom to find her 12-year-old granddaughter unconscious. Guys, she was levitating above her bed. Several children who had been sleeping over that night refused to never come back after witnessing this. Latoya was desperate. She reached out to churches, and most of them completely dismissed her. Now, one finally did come, and they immediately declared the home filled with spirits. Shocker. And interestingly, she was told to wipe down every surface with bleach and ammonia. She was told to draw crosses on every window and door with oil, paint crosses on her children's foreheads, and pour olive oil on their hands and feet. I have never heard of anything like this before. Y'all, Latoya did all of it. She was desperate. And then when that didn't seem to work, she called 2 clairvoyants that came to the house to help her. They told her that this home was occupied by over 200 demons. They burned sage and sulfur, constructed an altar in the basement, and it seemed to have held the demons off for like 3 days. And then things got worse. On April 19th, 2012, Latoya took her children to the family doctor. They saw a doctor named Joffrey O. I can't pronounce his last name and I don't want to butcher it. He had been practicing there for over 20 years. The moment they arrived, both boys began cursing him in demonic voices. Medical staff watched Latoya's youngest son fly through the air and slam into the wall. I mean, guys, it just keeps going. And yes, this is all documented. It is freaking insane. Oh, and by the way, the child flying across the room, yet nobody touched him. And then both boys lost consciousness. 8 police officers and multiple ambulances were called, and the boys were rushed to a Methodist hospital. And then the Department of Child Services worker Valerie Washington was called in to investigate. She interviewed the youngest boy, and he bared his teeth and growled at her. His eyes rolled into the back of his head, and he grabbed his brother by the throat, and he would not let go until he was physically pried off of him. And then in a voice that was absolutely not his own, he growled, "It's time to die. I will you." So Washington brought a nurse, Willie Lee Walker, with her to interview the boys again. And their grandmother Rosa did join as well. The 7-year-old continued to growl. The 9-year-old began headbutting and ramming into his grandmother's stomach. And Rosa grabbed his hands and started to pray. What else could she do? And then in front of Valerie Washington and the nurse, the 9-year-old boy grinned with an unsettling look in his eyes and then proceeded to walk backwards up the wall and across the ceiling upside down. Yeah, you heard me right. And then flipped over his grandmother and landed on his feet. Washington even wrote later on in her official government report that the boy had not run up the wall like an acrobat. He glided slowly with ease, as if gravity simply did not apply to him. So she ran out of the room. The nurse runs out behind her, and Washington later quit this case entirely. The DCS then took emergency custody of all 3 children without even getting a court order. LaToya, understandably, was absolutely devastated. Then a Catholic priest named Father Michael Maginot, he agreed to help. During his first 4-hour interview with LaToya and Rosa, so many more paranormal things happened. He even pressed a crucifix to LaToya's forehead and she convulsed. And so he applied to the Catholic Church for a full exorcism, and they denied him. After much persistence, though, eventually they did get the permission, and he performed 3 exorcisms on LaToya alone. She convulsed through all of them and said that the demons inflicted pain on her as they struggled to hang on. Guys, there is so much more to the story. I can't even fit it in the 10 minutes I'm allowed here on TikTok. I think I'm gonna go ahead and move it over to my YouTube channel. I'll put the handle in the caption. After the exorcisms, LaToya and her mother did relocate to another home. And after 6 months apart, LaToya was finally reunited with her 3 babies. They all reported feeling safe in their new home. So then Zach Baggins from Ghost Adventures ended up buying the house. Multiple people who entered reported horrible things, feeling ill, and he ended up completely demolishing it in 2016. Netflix even made a film based on this story called The Deliverance, but no movie could ever capture what it really felt like to be in that situation. Oh my God, guys. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever heard of this one before? Have you ever had an experience with possession or know someone who has? Let me know. And if you're new here, follow for more creepy story time. Again, in a few days here, I'm going to collect this story up and go in full detail over on my YouTube channel, where currently I have repeats of what I tell here, but I am in the midst of going longer form over there with stories unique to that platform. All a work in progress, and I hope to see you over there. I'll drop my handle here and in the caption.
Have you ever heard of the dancing plague of 1518? This all happened in July of 1518 in Strasbourg, which at the time was a part of the Holy Roman Empire, but today it is France. One woman named Frau Trophia stepped out into the street and just started dancing. This went on for about a week. Now, there was no music going on. She was literally just dancing. But it didn't stop with her. Within that week, some 36 other people had joined in to dance with her. Again, there was no music, there was just dancing. And it didn't stop there. By August, there were anywhere from 50 to 400 people who were also affected by this, just dancing in the street. City officials didn't know what to do, so they decided to set up a band to play for the people, to play music for these people, thinking that they would dance themselves or dance it out of themselves, I guess. But people were starting to collapse. Some were having strokes, others heart attacks. Like, this was a big deal, and people couldn't stop. Doctors at the time had a theory that there was hot blood because it was in July, it was probably hot. So they thought that maybe they were just had like a fever that was taking over and that they were dancing out the fever. This wouldn't stop until September, until the remaining victims were taken away to a mountaintop shrine to pray for absolution. What's strange is that this isn't the only time this has happened. This has been well documented in 16th century historical records. Similar events took place in Switzerland, Germany, and Holland, but none of them were as horrific as this one was. There are some modern day explanations, and there's a historian named John Waller who says that this probably came from Saint Vitus, who is a Catholic saint who Europeans believed could curse people with a dancing plague. At the time that this was happening, there was disease and famine running rampant, and so this might have been mass psychosis. People believing that the saint had, in fact, plagued them with dancing. Other people believe that this may have been some kind of a religious cult, or that they had accidentally ingested ergot, which is a mold that grows on damp rye. When you ingest this, it can induce hallucinations and also spasms. So what are your thoughts? Do you think that this was mass psychosis? Was this some kind of mold? What was going on here? I'm curious. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and follow for more strange history.
Spooky story time. The house we live in today is from the 1980s. And an old woman used to live here before us, but she passed away from old age. When my family got settled in, strange things apparently started happening. Let me go ahead and say I wasn't born yet, but I've experienced my own paranormal things in this house. Everyone started having dreams about her. My sister said she was screaming at her, but there was no sound, and her hair kept going in and out of her head. My father, who doesn't believe in ghosts, said he had a dream about her too. He was asleep on the couch, and she was hovering above him, screaming at him to get out of her house. My mom, who was very religious, sat on her bed one day and could feel her presence, not see her or anything, but she just knew she was there. My mom told her, "This is our home. We bought it with our money that we saved. We plan to stay here until we retire and pass. I'm sorry for what happened to you, but you have to understand that this is our home now." Ever since that happened, things started to calm down. Little things would happen here and there, chairs moving, the stove turning on, the sink turning on, until I was born. When I was born, nothing would happen at all. Everyone realized when there were kids or babies around, the old spirit woman wouldn't do anything. My mom once saw her standing by my crib, just looking at me. Not hateful, but like she was happy to see a newborn. Then, fast forward to 2019. My sister got a divorce and she lived in a big house. Our dad didn't want her to be alone in such a big place, so he asked me, "Would you go stay with her so she's not alone?" I agreed. Then, in 2023, our father passed away. And we didn't want our mom to be alone, so we sold the house and moved back in with our mother. And then, everything started happening again. The lights would flicker, everyone started having dreams about her again. At one point, when we were all talking about it, the power got cut off, then back on, then off again, and you could hear the breaker being switched. One time, I was fixing my mom's laptop at the kitchen table, and 3 of my cats were watching me. Then, all of a sudden, I heard something singing from under the house, and all the cats' heads slowly oh my, that sounds so scary. And all the cats' heads slowly turned toward where it was coming from. I went pale. Another time, I walked into my room and my fiance was asleep, but as soon as I stepped in, a black shadow ran through the wall, knocking over the trash can. Me and one of my cats took off running straight into the living room. Well, that was super scary. And it kind of reminds me of my house, of the creepy things that always happen here, and the different spirits that we've seen.
This has to be one of the most horrifying love spell stories that I've told. I don't know who needs to hear this, but don't do a love spell on that man. I am back with another spooky story. So the person who submitted this story claimed that they were a witch's niece, and growing up she constantly saw a woman come back crying after obsession work went wrong. Now she said this specific case really stuck with her because it was one of the few times her aunt genuinely tried to refuse the spell. So we're gonna call this client Linda. So Linda was about 22 and she was dating this guy named, we're gonna call him Marcus. At first he was charming, protected, and obsessed with her, but in a romantic way. Then their relationship slowly turned ugly. This perfect guy in this perfect relationship just started to go bad. He started accusing her of cheating out of nowhere, and he was just this angry man, like he would punch holes in the walls. And later in the relationship, their disagreements would turn physical. It was a domestic type of situation. Everybody was telling Linda to leave him, but instead, for some reason, she became terrified of losing him. She loved that man despite the abuse. So Linda was telling her friends about her relationship problems, and one of them told her about this woman who lives in town who does relationship work. Now, this is not no TikTok witchcraft. She went to her before and she had some good results. And this woman works with candle work, oils, graveyard dirt. Now, the witch worked out of the back of a tiny beauty supply store, but she didn't have any signs up. It was more so like a if you know, you know. Now, when Linda gets there, she tells the witch about her relationship issues, the ups, the downs, and where they were currently. Why would you want a man like that tied to you permanently? Linda said that she just really wanted him to love her harder. So keep in mind, it's the witch's niece that submitted the story. So she was there. She said her aunt, the witch says to Linda, baby, abusive men already operate from obsession. You don't add spiritual obsession into that. It twists them. But Linda just kept begging. She said Marcus started pulling away and talking to other women. She just wanted him loyal again. She wanted him to come crawling back. And Linda also believed that if he genuinely loved her, he wouldn't be abusive to her anymore. Now, the witch refused twice, but Linda wasn't trying to leave that shop. And finally, the witch goes, my job is my job. But when this turns bad, don't come back to me asking me to undo anything that you begged for. The ritual itself sounded disturbing. Linda bought Marcus's shirt, nail clippings, a photo of them together. Witch used red candles and something that smelled really bad, and then pricked the girl's finger for. After the work was done, the witch told Linda, take it easy. For the first week, Linda didn't come back to the shop, so they assumed nothing happened. But on Linda's end, Marcus was basically changing overnight. At first, it looked like the spell worked perfectly. He stopped talking to other girls, started showing up with gifts. He would cry if Linda even threatened to leave him. He called her 40 to 50 times a day just to hear her breathing. And then it escalated. This video is already way too long, and TikTok is not gonna boost it. So leave a comment for part 2. I'm literally recording and dropping part 2 right now. Relax. I'm back with part 2 right away without making y'all wait 24 hours. But anyway, Marcus is obsessed with Linda, but in the way that she likes. It's very reminiscent of how their relationship was when it first started. Before the abuse, before the cheating scandal, Linda is thinking that it was good. However, this man wasn't sleeping. Like, he genuinely stopped sleeping. Linda said this man would sit at the foot of her bed, literally watching her for hours. It doesn't matter how early that Linda would wake up, he would always be up before her. His whole entire life became about Linda and pleasing Linda. At the time, Linda had reservations about him working at the club, and he quit his job to appease her. But after he left that job, that's when things really got bad, because at this point he refused to leave her apartment. He started to accuse random strangers of trying to steal her energy. He started getting into Linda's heads about her friendships, about her parents. It was driving a big wedge between Linda and everybody that she loved and trusted. But she really wanted Marcus, so pretty much she ditched everybody for Marcus. However, Marcus's violence started to creep back up. He once attacked an old man at a gas station because he accidentally held the door open for her. As if the story couldn't get any creepier, then came the animals. This part genuinely made my stomach turn. She said Marcus started bringing her unalived animals as gifts. Birds, rats, one time a cat. He would leave them either in front of the door, under her pillow. When she would ask him about it, he said he believed that sacrifices protected their relationship. But Linda started being scared because of how calm he became while doing horrible things. Linda wanted to go visit her mother real quick, and that turned into one of the worst days of her life, because that man did everything in his power to not allow her to leave. It got physical and she got pinned down to the ground. A couple weeks after that, she tried to leave him. She packed her bags and said she was done. She said he pinned her against the door, hand on neck, telling her that if he cannot have her alive, if he can't have her, then no one else will. And just something about his face was really scaring her in that moment. That night, Linda was so scared. She played friendly to him, and then the next day she went back to the witch. Now, the niece says when her and her aunt saw Linda walk into the shop, when the aunt/witch saw Linda walk into the shop, they already knew what time it was. And this is when Linda gets to telling them everything that she's been going through. And it's been nothing short of abuse. It's gotten worse. So the aunt tells her, that's what I was trying to tell you. Obsession doesn't create love. It amplifies possession possession, fear, rage, insecurity, whatever is already living inside of that person. And Marcus already had that darkness in him before the spell. It just has ammo now. Her aunt still agreed to do a cleansing, but warned her that it may not fully work. After that, things got even stranger, because when she got back, Marcus was paranoid. And Linda was so scared that she decided to get police involved. Because of all the disturbing voice messages that he would send to her anyway, that was enough to basically get her a restraining order. He violated the restraining order multiple times. However, he winded up getting arrested. The last thing that the niece heard about was his arrest. He was locked up for a couple of months, but the niece said that after that, she never heard from Linda again. She said when this story happened, she was pretty young, and that made her realize that she would never, under any circumstances, ever do a love spell on somebody.
I used to clean houses in a gated community in Florida, and there's one specific client that I still have a hard time talking about to this day. So there's this one woman, she was alone, she had a huge, massive house, and she had one rule, and it was to never close any interior doors. At first I thought it was just some kind of rich person thing that I didn't understand, but then I started to notice over the next little bit that there was something strange in each room of this house. Like, for example, in the guest room, there was a glass full of water sitting on the nightstand, and it was like it was replaced. This wouldn't look weird if it didn't look like super empty in the bedroom itself. The office had family pictures that were face down, and there was a clock, like a bunch of clocks in another room, and all of them were set for 14 minutes ahead. One day I accidentally shut the laundry room door while I was vacuuming, and the homeowner, she appeared almost immediately. She didn't yell or get mad, she was just like, "You can't do that again." I apologized and I opened the door, but when I looked at her, she looked genuinely shaken up by this. A few weeks later, I went to go clean the house, and I came a little earlier than I was planned for, and so I just kind of let myself in by the garage code, and when I got in, I heard a man talking upstairs. And I know that she's a single woman, so I just figured maybe she had company, so I just stayed downstairs and cleaned quietly. I realized I was only hearing one voice upstairs, like somebody was speaking but the other person wasn't responding, but I distinctly made out they said she noticed the clocks, and I'm assuming they were talking about me. After they said that, it was silent for a sec, and then I started to hear footsteps going to like room to room. When the homeowner eventually came downstairs, she was alone, and I was like, "Oh, is like somebody with you?" And she said no. And then I noticed, so I finished up cleaning, and then I left, and I didn't go back. And then about a year later, somebody from the same cleaning company reached out to me and asked if I remember this house. And I said, "Yes, why?" And they said, "Well, the homeowner died." And I was like, "Oh, like when did they pass away?" And they said, "Don't you know, it was years ago." So I finished up cleaning, and then I left, and I didn't go back to clean that house again. And then 1 year later, one of the cleaners from that company that I worked for, they reached out to me, and they asked me if I remembered the house because I guess the homeowner passed away. I asked them when that happened, and they just looked confused, and they said it was years ago. Didn't you know that?
We've just had a recent Mothman sighting. Actually, two. Now, these were reported to me that happened within the same general time frame of last week. This first report comes out of Bloomington, Illinois at ISU near Williams Hall. Now, we had a witness who wishes to remain anonymous. They said they were walking late one night near Williams Hall when they seen what appeared to be a man or something standing on one of the buildings. They said when they looked closely, whatever this was appeared to have glowing bright red eyes. And at the time, they thought maybe this was a Halloween prank until whatever this was took off into the sky with large flapping wings and headed east across town. The second report comes out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, near the Safe Harbor Trail. There was a man, an older gentleman, who was walking his dog late Thursday night when he said his dog alerted to something and started barking. When he looked closely up on this hill, he seen something standing there that looked kind of like a man, but had glowing red eyes and large wings. And whatever this was, it made a large screeching howl and then took off directly into the sky. So, have you seen any Mothman sightings recently or heard of any? Please feel free to drop them in the comments or send me a message. Have you ever had stuff just randomly disappear from your house? Like one day you discover that something is missing, and for years you look for it, but then one day it mysteriously appears. Believe it or not, this is quite common amongst people. But could there be something supernatural to that? Now, cultures across the world all spoke of these trickster-type spirits that were known for playing tricks on people. They would often come into people's homes at night and move around stuff, take stuff. And you ask, why would they do this? Because this creates fear, this creates confusion, and this creates anger. All of things which negative entities feed on. So if they take an object from your home and they move it or they hide it and you can't find it, you get freaked out, you get angry, and often it can cause division in the home amongst people. Now, the Native Americans, right, they have these stories of animals being these trickster type spirits. In European culture, they call them goblins and fairies, but these things are very much real. Now, there was this guy named Marcus. Marcus and his mom lived in Tampa Bay, Florida. And he said one day he was in his bedroom and he had this big cabinet. And on the top shelf, he kept this ring. This ring was special to him because his father gave it to him before he passed away. So he would often take the ring out and he would put it on because it reminded him of him. And when he was done with the ring, he would put it on that top shelf every time. But he said one day he went to go and grab the ring and it wasn't there. So he started frantically searching his entire room and he can't find this thing. So he goes out the room and he goes to his mother's room and he says, Mom, like, did you take Dad's ring? Like, what did you do with it? She says, I did not touch your dad's ring. Like, I haven't been in your bedroom. So they search the entire house. They cannot find this ring anywhere. A couple weeks later, his mom comes running into his room and she's like, okay, Marcus, what did you do with my favorite dress? He goes, what are you talking about? She goes, I know that you've taken my dress and hidden it somewhere or done something with it because you were mad at me about the ring. And he goes, Mom, like, I didn't take your dress. And she goes, okay, whatever. Over the next few months, they start noticing more and more things go missing around their house. And it was getting to the point where Marcus would be brushing his hair. He would set down his comb and then it was gone. And he could not find these items anywhere. So one day he has a talk with his friend who was very superstitious. And she tells him, you know, sometimes spirits take these objects and these items from our homes. Why don't you call out alone in your bedroom and ask the spirit to return this item? So he goes home and he goes into his bedroom and he says, you know, hey, could you please return my father's ring? Like, it means a lot to me. That night he goes to bed. And when he wakes up in the morning, he gets up out of the bed and he finds this ring on the ground right next to the bed. Now, he had searched this area hundreds of times and somehow the ring just appeared there. So he figured maybe I just misplaced it and I didn't realize it. Well, this continued to happen where things would just randomly disappear from the home. One night he's in his bedroom and he's asleep. And he said he heard some sound from out in the living room. So he gets up out of bed, he walks down the hallway, and when he comes into the living room, he sees his mom laying on the couch. But standing over the top of her, he sees this shadowy figure trying to take off her earring. And this figure turns, it looks at Marcus, and it just disappears. And it was at that point he knew that some sort of spirit was taking the items from his house. Are there giant spiders in Colorado? Now, in the 1800s, there was a story that came out of Chaffee County, Colorado. And it said that some of the townspeople found this mysterious cave. And within this cave, they found these very large spiders that were the size of cats. These spiders were not very normal spiders. Sometimes they acted very intelligently, and they were almost dog-like. Now, it's said that these locals, they would take the webbing from these spiders, which was almost like a pure silk, and they would make rope and clothing. They would even hunt the spiders themselves and make gloves. And the weirdest part about this story is some of the locals were said to have taken these spiders and turned them into pets, and they would use them to sort of protect their house and their livestock. But it said that these spiders were also sometimes aggressive, and from time to time, a person or an animal would go missing, and many people suspected it was these mysterious spiders. Now, there was a story of a prospector named Schultz. Schultz heard from some of the locals about this cave, and apparently there was a very large vein of gold. But he was told by the locals, do not go there because that's where these spiders live, and they do not like people going near this cave. But he was filled with greed. He heads up the mountain, and he ends up finding the cave. For 3 days, he's prospecting, and he returns back to the townspeople, and he tells them, I found gold, and there's lots of it, enough to make this whole town rich. But none of the townspeople would go anywhere near this cave. And he said to them, I've seen these spiders. Mostly they hide in a cave. They don't come out during the day. But at night, they come very close to my camp. They've taken one of my dogs. They've almost taken one of my mules. And I'm afraid eventually they will take me. But he was so consumed with greed that he decided to go back. And many days passed, they never heard from the prospector. And after about a week, they went up to the mountain and found this cave. And all they found remaining of him were his bones. And it said still to this day in Chaffee County, in the mountains of Colorado, you can see these giant, abnormally large spiders.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. While I lived with my grandmother in Morocco, something happened that I'll never be able to forget. About 5 years ago, I lived with my grandmother in this very old mud brick home. Like, ancient, old. Just looking around the place, you could tell. The walls were cracked from age. The ceilings were dark wooden beams that ran the entire length of the home, and every hallway was always dark, as if the light somehow just couldn't reach them. At night, the house would come alive. Wind would whip through the narrow alleyways outside, and you could hear the sounds of footsteps carry over from people walking through the Medina. Soft prayers being whispered long after midnight, just drifting by your ears. The sounds became peaceful to me, though, and most nights in that house were calm and warm. But even though I got to a point where the house and its sounds and looks would bring me peace, not every part of the home felt that way. There was one part of the house that no one would acknowledge. No one liked to talk about it or bring attention to it in any way. It was a small room at the very back of the hallway. Its dark wooden door was always shut. Always. As a kid, I remember being curious about the door, why no one would open it or go near it. And I wondered what was behind it that was being kept hidden. So I tried to open it once, but my grandmother caught me almost immediately and stopped me. She wasn't angry with me. She seemed relieved that she had gotten to me in time before I was able to open that door. She grabbed my wrist, looked down at me, and said sternly, "Never go into that room after dark." I laughed at the time. Something about her warning me about a door, a room. It all felt very superstitious. Some old lore, maybe, that had been told for years, and it was my turn to hear the warnings. Every old person had strange rules, right? I do remember, however, second-guessing my train of thought because she did seem serious, not playful in any way, or like she was saying something that had been repeated 100 times just for the sake of it. She sounded like she was putting meaning and experience behind her warning. So I left the room alone. I never attempted to open the door again, but after that I would notice things. Every now and then, especially late at night, I would hear sounds coming from inside of that room. So scrape against the floor, a whisper spoken too quietly, you couldn't help but second guess it. Sometimes I would even hear some sort of movement. For the sake of honoring my grandmother's rules, I tried convincing myself that it was just the old house settling. I tried not to let curiosity get the best of me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't shifting door frames or creaky floorboards. During one hot summer night, my grandmother had fallen asleep early in the living room, while the television played softly in the background. Besides the soft hum of the TV and a constant ticking coming from a wall clock, the house was eerily quiet. I found myself staring down the hallway toward that closed door. I was at a crossroads, looking between my sleeping grandmother and the mysterious door. I couldn't stop thinking about it, like I was being pulled toward it. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I told myself if I'd just peek inside for a second wouldn't hurt anything. I wouldn't even open the door all the way, just enough to look in, and that's it. I'd close it right back up and act like nothing ever happened. Nothing more. So I got up quietly and walked down the hallway barefoot. The floor felt cold under my feet, and it bit at my toes. And the closer I got to the room, the colder everything around me became, which was near impossible. I was in Morocco in the middle of summer. Even when the sun went down, the heat was unbearable. But standing near that door felt like stepping into a different climate entirely. I placed my fingers around the knob and I hesitated. Alarm bells were going off in my head, begging me to walk away. It wasn't too late to turn around, but I didn't. I turned the knob and slowly pushed the door open. The hinges creaked so softly it almost sounded like a sigh of relief from the door. Inside, the room was nearly empty. There was an old mattress on the floor, a cracked mirror leaning against one wall, and a stack of what seemed to be forgotten boxes in a corner. And dust covered every possible inch. Almost immediately, though, I noticed the light, a dim yellow glow coming from inside the room. Nothing bright enough to see properly, but bright enough to assume that something was wrong here. A light on in a room that was forbidden to enter and seemingly not in use. And the thing is, I couldn't figure out where the light was coming from. There was no lamp, no candle, it just was. And the smell, like dust and earth, something underneath, like the room was desperately trying to cover something up. I was ensnared. The room had grasped every inch of my attention, and almost involuntarily, I took one step inside. That's when I saw him. He was sitting on the floor against a far wall. A man. He was dressed in clothing that seemed to be from decades before, dark pants, a loose shirt. He was slouched forward, almost suggesting that he had been sitting there for a very long time. His face, it wasn't there. Not exactly, anyway. It was blurred, as if he had moved right before someone snapped a photo of him. Even though I couldn't see his features clearly, I could tell he was looking directly at me. I had his full attention, and almost as immediately as I noticed him noticing me, he started whispering. Quietly and quickly, strange, dry, and almost distant at first. I fought to understand what he was saying, but then it became clear. He was asking me something. He was asking where something was. He was begging for it. Something important for him, it seemed. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream for my grandmother, but I couldn't move. My entire body was locked on that spot, my eyes locked on him, and then he slowly tilted his head, and I realized that he was no longer looking at me, but on something past me, something behind me. And seconds later, I heard her footsteps coming towards me. She didn't yell at me. She didn't run. She didn't panic. She walked up almost as if she had been expecting this, as if she had just been waiting for the day. In her hands, she had a small brass bowl with some herbs and incense burning inside of it. The smoke rising out of it had a deep, earthy smell. She gently pulled me behind her and began speaking calmly in Arabic. She took her time and spoke clearly and confidently, respectfully almost. The man on the floor kept staring at her silently while the smoke drifted through the room. And then slowly he began to fade. His body became thinner and thinner until there was nothing left of him except the empty wall. The room immediately felt warmer, and I found myself crying and asking my grandmother what I had just seen. She refused to answer me. She only shut the door and locked it. The next morning, after a night of mulling it over, she finally told me the truth. That room had belonged to her brother many years earlier. One day he left the house and never came back. No body was ever found. No explanation as to where he went, where he ended up. He just simply vanished. But according to my grandmother, sometimes he returned, back to his old bedroom in search of something, always searching for something. She told me that before he vanished, he always wore a ring with a blue stone that had belonged to their father. She believed whatever remained of him could not rest because he was looking for that ring. Later that day, she took me back into that bedroom and had me pull a loose stone in the wall. Tucked inside was an old silver ring covered in dust, and in the center was a blue stone.
A series of spooky stories except for its women's intuition, part 4. These are from my comment section. 4 years ago, I woke up one night out of a dead sleep around 3 a.m. I was crying and feeling like I couldn't breathe. It took what seemed like forever for me to go back to sleep. I got up and went to work. I made it through most of the day. And at 3:30 p.m., I got a call from my mom's boss asking if I had heard from her because she didn't show up for work. I tried calling and had one of her sisters try calling. No answer. That's when the feeling of something not being right set in. I tried to play it off because she was known for sleeping with her phone on vibrate. After a welfare check, it was found that she had passed in her sleep, most likely around 3 to 4 a.m. I am so sorry for your loss. And how crazy is it that we are so connected to people, that we feel things like this? I got a double intuition one, prefacing this with a trigger warning for car accident. So a week before the incident, my husband, then fiance, had a nightmare of me being in a car accident and told me about it and how I had been in a car with 3 of my friends. A week later, me and 3 of my friends were going to drive at night. At first, the car stalled in the driveway, and I had this feeling that we shouldn't go, even when we got it to start. And I would have automatically went back to my husband or my fiance telling me about that fucking dream. But the driver was insistent that we go, so we did. I was in the passenger seat up front and the other two were still in the back. I still had this really bad gut feeling, and I know seatbelts save lives, but as we were getting on the highway, I just had this feeling that my friend in the back behind the driver needed to lay down. So I told him to unbuckle and lay down with his head in our other friend's lap. We were hit not even 2 minutes later, hit and run hard enough that the side behind the driver's was caved in. If I hadn't told my friend to lay down, he wouldn't be here today. Instead, he laid down and only suffered whiplash and a minor concussion. Lived in New York in the early 2000s. On September 10th, I had spent the night with my friend in Brooklyn and was going to take a taxi into Manhattan in the morning. That morning came, her grandmother begged us to stay home. That day, 9/11, and not go into the city. We decided to hang out and eat all day. Her dad worked in Tower 2 and never went to work. We all survived because of her, and she said that she knew something was going to happen. She saved my life. I was relaxing at home when I suddenly felt a cold tightening of my stomach and then thought that I had to call my grandfather at that same moment. It was so intense, I dropped what I was holding. I called him. He told me that he loved me, but he was exhausted and was going to lay down for a nap. I told him I loved him and I missed him, and we agreed to call the following day. He never woke up from his nap. Just make the call. If you have the feeling, just make the call. On my 16th birthday, I was going to sneak out and party, all dressed up, waiting for my friends to pull up. I get this feeling of doom, almost like a panic attack, but it was a voice that said, "Don't go." That freaked me out. I called my friend and said, "Don't even come because I ain't going." She got so mad at me, but when I woke up the next morning, that whole venue had a shootout, leaving 2 deceased. Many arrested. It wasn't a big venue either. They said that people were running away in every direction but up. I couldn't help but think, where would I have been? Would I have been the one shot? Was that the voice? That feeling? I think about it often. I needed to return some items at an outlet, but something kept telling me to push it off. I ignored it because I thought that I was just being lazy because I really didn't want to drive that day or go out. I kept telling myself that the drive is only 15 minutes. I'll be in and out 10 minutes max. I walked out the door, realized that I forgot to put contacts in. So I went back into my apartment and I put them in. Walked out again, got in my car and realized I left my wallet and went back in. Got my wallet, got in the car again, realized the receipt wasn't in my wallet or bag, so I went back in. Right before I left my apartment, my sleeve got caught on the handle. I felt chills and I heard a voice telling me to just sit still, and that's exactly what I did. Literally, 25 minutes later on the dot, there were videos all over my social media about an active shooter, and he was right in front of the store that I was going to. Had I ignored the signs, I would have just walked right into a mass pew-pewing. I don't even think it was the signs. Like that wasn't even just signs. That was literally the universe physically stopping you from doing what you needed to do. You forgot your contacts. You can't drive without your contacts. You forgot your wallet. You have to have your card. You have to have the receipt. The receipt wasn't in your wallet. Your sleeve gets caught. It's physically stopping you. Are you kidding me? That's crazy. My mom's house was easy to get into. I saw someone's grandma use a 2x4 to secure their door. My granny did that. For years, she talked about it. One summer I was visiting and my friend and I did the measurements, picked up the supplies, and he installed them on both doors. A day or two later, I woke up to a man trying to break in. He carded the door at 7 a.m. The door opened, but he couldn't get past the 2x4. Scary how the timing worked out. A couple of years ago, my ex's grandmother asked me to help her talk him into bringing home a puppy from the grocery store parking lot. As much as we didn't need a dog, I just had a feeling that she needed me the second I met her. A couple months later, she was laying right under my feet when I was washing dishes, and I didn't realize until I went to turn away from the sink. I tripped over the dog and fell flat on my face. My body started twitching uncontrollably, and I truly thought that I broke my nose. It turns out that there was a golf ball-sized malignant tumor in the back of my head, and when I fell on my face, the top of my spine injured the tumor and started causing seizure activity. I had about 2 years left if they hadn't found it. That damn dog saved my life. And maybe that was your ex's grandmother's intuition too. Maybe she was thinking that y'all needed that dog for some reason, other than the fact that the dog needed y'all. You know what I mean? That is so crazy. Come back for part 5.
Okay, so one thing I don't see a lot of people talking about when it comes to this whole Mackenzie Sharilla case, in the Netflix documentary pretty early on, and this actually lit a light bulb for me. One of the guys there claimed, and he said he doesn't know how much he believed this, but he said that Dom couldn't leave Mackenzie because Mackenzie was doing voodoo on him and like doing love spells on him and stuff like that, session spells, and then they just kind of like moved past that. As somebody who tells spooky stories and somebody who's from Haiti, I don't want to put a whole situation on just one thing. When I say stop doing love spells on people, you never know what the outcome will be. That energy unfortunately had nowhere to go but back to Mackenzie. It amplified what was already there. And it depends on the kind of spells you do. Now, Mackenzie being a white girl, and her being very young, that type of stuff is not in her lineage. You can easily fuck up. And when it comes to magic, doing one tiny thing wrong can be the biggest mistake of your life. We don't know what Mackenzie was dabbling with and how many times she dabbled. But from the text messages between Dominic and Mackenzie, it was very clear that Mackenzie was obsessed. And her obsession with him just grew and grew and grew. And a lot of people are questioning this because it just seems like, at least according to the text messages between the two, Dom sounded so uninterested. A lot of people are asking, why didn't he leave? Outside of the fact that he tried breaking up with her multiple times, a lot of times you can be over a situation, however, something is keeping you tethered. That whole story, if you zoom out and go back, it sounds almost like a spooky story that I've told on this page before. Love spells are nothing to play with. Voodoo is nothing to play with. And it is absolutely tragic what happened to those boys. Spirits come to collect. Spells backfire all the time. And again, it amplifies what was already there. If Dominic was uninterested from start, he would only become more uninterested. However, if she's binding them together, it's definitely a lot harder to escape that dynamic. Ultimately, Mackenzie was just not a great person. I do find it interesting how they brought up voodoo into this whole thing, or that Mackenzie was dabbling in love spells. Let me know what you guys think.
I got time today. And some of y'all gonna fuck around and find out, because some of y'all want spirituality to look aesthetic like it does online. But real spirituality, it will tear your whole entire fucking life apart before it reveals you. And hey, toxins, welcome back to my page where I don't spill tea, I brew coffee. And not everything that I serve is gonna be safe. So I just want y'all to stop romanticizing spirituality for like 5 seconds. Because a lot of people think spirituality is just candles and angel numbers and moon water, crystals and soft music. And cute little TikTok posts about healing. You know, play pussy and get fucked. Because that's not what it is. Real spirituality is confrontation. It is the violence that's dismantling every false version of yourself that you built just to survive. And guess what? That's why spirituality is not for everybody. Because most people don't actually want the truth. They want comfort. And spirituality will remove comfort from your life so fast that it'll make your damn head spin. You start waking up spiritually, and suddenly the relationship stop. It don't feel right no more. The conversations feel like shallow. Certain places start draining you. Certain people start irritating your spirit. And then the life that you once tolerated is gonna start like it was suffocating you. And you wanna know why? Because awareness destroys illusion. And once your eyes open, you cannot force them closed again. People think shadow work is just journaling and crying. No, baby, it tore my life apart. Shadow work is meeting the parts of yourself that you spent years hiding in the basement of your own mind. Your jealousy, your rage, your abandonment wounds, your manipulative habits, your ego, them trauma responses, your addictions to chaos, your fear of being alone. And then the most terrifying part was, real spirituality will force you to realize that sometimes you were the storm too. That realization alone breaks people, because it's easier to call everybody else toxic than to confront the darkness living inside yourself. And here's another thing that nobody want to say out loud, but you know I never gave a fuck. Spiritual awakening, that's lonely. You're gonna lose people. You're gonna outgrow environments. You're gonna stop fitting into spaces that you once begged to be in. And some people even spiral mentally because they open doors emotionally and spiritually before grounding themselves psychologically. That's why discernment is gonna matter. Because spirituality without grounding is gonna become a delusion. And healing without accountability, that's gonna become ego dressed in incense smoke. You heard me. Look, toxins. Real spirituality is not about escaping reality. It is about seeing reality clearly for the first time. And honestly, some people are not ready for that level of awareness. But I'm warning y'all, and I'm serving it black today. I want y'all to drink from a clean source. I love y'all, and I'll see you in the next video.
Let's look at some creepy Reddit pictures. My aunt lives in Virginia and went to an old family cemetery near her home. The friend she was with wanted to find some headstones and take photos of them to send to relatives. They hiked up to where the cemetery was supposed to be to look for the headstones, but they couldn't find them due to everything being so overgrown. When she got the photos developed, she saw this in one of the images. My aunt said that when she first saw this picture, she asked a Ouija board who the person's name was, and it told her it was an 8-year-old child who had passed away. This was taken winter, Texas boonies, overgrown area in the 1980s. It's a picture of my great-grandfather and a woman standing behind the stone. No one was there besides my great-grandfather and uncle and dad. Maybe they didn't notice that somebody else was there, but the clothing and the pose behind the stone makes it seem a little odd.
Read a scary Reddit story with me. My house is about 94 years old. I moved in with my spouse about a year ago, and our experiences have me terrified in my own home. Right when we first moved in, odd things started to happen, but we chalked it up to it being an old house and us just adjusting. There would be weird knocks around the house, temperature changes, things that can be easily explained. But over the past year, things have gone entirely downhill. There have been instances where I wake up in the middle of the night, sweating beyond belief. It's literally hot as a furnace, and it feels like my skin is peeling off. My partner has experienced this also. Just as much, it often gets freezing in the house, even on a sunny, hot day, to the point that you can see your breath when you exhale. There are loud sounds that occur, but we have never been able to find the source. Water in the sinks will be turned on and off. You have to turn the knob to do that, and neither of us did. And it reeks in the house. It will smell like mold, rot, or fire, but then the odor will vanish just as quick as it started. We have had specialists over to look at everything, multiple times. Mold inspectors, electricians, plumbers, HVAC technicians, everyone. All of them have reported that there is nothing wrong, everything is up to code, and there are no problems. There was one day back in August when I was home alone, cleaning the house, and I heard my partner's voice yell a "hey" at me from upstairs. I thought I was hearing things, but I heard it again and then again. I was confused, so I headed upstairs to see what the sound was. Maybe I had misheard or something. But the second I got upstairs, I heard the same yell from downstairs. Not only that, but it started to call my name specifically. The calling out continued, and loud bangs started to sound, like someone was throwing stuff around. But no matter where I went in the house, they sounded just as loud. I was so disturbed and practically hysterical by the time my spouse returned home. Not only that, but I swear whatever this is trying to harm us. I have been laying in bed when I suddenly feel as though I am being choked. I feel something around my neck tightening and cutting off my breathing. I have no respiratory issues, and I have been to the doctor. Both my spouse and I have felt as if we've been hit or scratched or punched, despite there being nothing there. There's loads more where that came from. I feel frightened, and whatever it is feels ill-intentioned to me. I'm scared to be alone in my home, and I can barely sleep. All my life, I have been a skeptic, but I just don't know how to handle this anymore. I would love to hear your thoughts on this story, and of course, if you have a story you would like me to share, feel free to DM me.
There is a force field that has been placed around this to keep people out, to keep people from staying too long. It was placed there by a group of individuals whose intention was to control the space. It feels very experimental. It feels like it was done in around the 1980s. And it was this test to see if they could control that space and who enters, who leaves. And there actually is an outside force that manipulates and sort of messes with people that go up there. I would personally be very cautious. You can go there, but I would not set any intentions or light anything or anything like that. Meditate there. I wouldn't do anything like that because there's this outside energy force that manipulates your energy and sort of redirects what it is. Like, you know, if let's say you sat there and you put it out to the universe that you wanted to manifest a new job, it would take that information and like manipulate it so that maybe you would end up with a new job, but there would be something uncomfortable about it, something that wasn't right. What keeps it more balanced is all of the nature that surrounds it. There are elementals and the trees, and the land around it is really healing and light filled, and so it really balances out this thing that was put around it. I actually might try and remove it, because it's not necessary and it's just harmful and hurtful to people and animals and anyone and anything that moves through there. I may have removed it. I would be interested if anyone goes to visit after today's date, which is May 21st, 2026, if they feel okay up there, if it feels a little bit better up there. I don't really know until someone tries. Another sign that it worked would be if birds start to land more often, they stay for longer periods. I'm not saying that birds necessarily neglect this building, but to have them come and stay, that's going to be key. To have other critters move through the building, even, rats and mice and just lots of critters that will come through and choose to stay and then move along. This will tell us that I was able to lift the bulk of it, if not all of it. More so because whichever group did that, this group of people that did that, it's influencing and affecting people as they move through the space, and that's creating karma for those still, even though this was placed back in 1980, that's still going to create karma for them, even if those people aren't even in body. It feels like the reason why this barrier was set up, it feels like there was a legal battle over the land. It feels like they did it to sort of repress the owners at the time. It feels like they did it to repress any sort of sale or monetizing or changing of hands, or even it could be that they were thinking of tearing it down, and this barrier was set up to do that at that time. The problem is the barrier was never taken down, and maybe it was preventative, but there was a lot of, oomph behind it to like really make sure nothing was touched with this space.
I literally just had a dream that I don't think that I was supposed to wake up from. I'm still scared and I'm terrified to go back to sleep because I don't want to come across what I came across in this dream. But apparently in this dream, I'm at my boyfriend's house, like my dream boyfriend's house, I guess. We get into an argument and I leave. As I get outside, it's nighttime. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, I need to just make it to like the main street and then I'll know where to go. I make it to the main street, which typically in my dream world, this main street or center city is always like super busy, but there's no one out there, which is weird. I decide that as long as I mind my business, I'll be fine. As I'm walking on the street trying to make my way back to my house, I come across these two ladies walking on the street, but these two ladies are completely dressed in black from like head to toe, like even their faces are covered. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, that's a bold choice, but not my business. I'm gonna just ignore them and keep walking. Also, part of me tells me, make sure you ignore them. Don't interact with them. As I walk past him, I accidentally bump into the one lady, and I'm like, I'm supposed to ignore them, and I bump into her. I turn around and I notice that she just continues walking. So I'm like, oh, I'm good. It's good. But the other lady that was with her, mind you, it was two ladies, stops. And I'm like, okay, crap, that's weird. Turn around and I continue walking. I'm like, still, like, just ignore them and then you'll be fine. Something tells me to turn around, but another part of me is saying, don't turn around. But something else is saying, turn around. But myself is like, don't turn around. I listen to the other part. I turn around and I see that she's now standing, like, mind you, she was going the opposite direction, but she's now standing facing me, just standing there. And I'm like, shit, like, I caught her attention. I'm like, great. Still with the whole, like, if I just ignore her, she'll go away theory. So I turn around to walk, but something again tells me to turn around a second time. So I do. I turn around that second time. When I turn around, I see her slowly taking off, like, her face covering. And she shows her face, and her face is a literal skull. No flesh on her body, on her face whatsoever. It's just a white skull. At this point, I'm like, oh shit, that's death. Like, that's literal, like, that's death. I need to get away from this thing. That's death. Before I know it, she's right in my face, and she's like attacking me. It only takes a few seconds for me to drop to the ground, and she's practically on top of me, like wailing her arms around. I'm not sure what she's doing, but the only thing that I can think of in that moment is to pray. So I start to pray, which kind of keeps her away for a little bit, but she's still like doing whatever it is she's doing to like attack me. Then I feel as like my soul is literally being ripped out of my body. Everything starts to go dark, and then I hear another voice say, wake up, like, you have to wake up. I'm like struggling to kind of like wake up, and it tells me, the voice once again says, open your eyes, you have to wake up. So I'm literally convulsing at this point, trying to figure out a way to wake up. And then I come back into my body, this body, but everything's so dark, and I'm literally prying my eyes open to like wake up, and then like I wake up, and then the dream is gone. Like, it's done. But I'm literally terrified to go back to sleep, because I really feel like I'm gonna run into this lady again. Like, she's waiting in like the dream world for me to like go back to sleep. Has anything like this ever happened to any of you guys? I've never come across this, surprisingly. But it's now 4:30 a.m. and I'm not going back to sleep. I'll deal with this tonight. I'm not going back to sleep.
For years, millions of Americans tuned in every single week to watch the Duggar family live their lives on television. Jim, Bob, and Michelle Duggar had 19 children, all with names starting with a J, raised in a household of faith and strict rules. The show was one of TLC's most watched programs of all time, and the family was looked at to be wholesome and relatable. They seemed to the millions of people who watched them like proof that a certain kind of life was possible. But then the truth started to come out, and it did not stop. And now members, plural, of the Duggar family are facing very serious, disturbing criminal charges. James Robert Duggar, known to everyone as Jim Bob, was born on July 18th, 1965 in Springdale, Arkansas. He married a woman called Michelle in 1984 when they were both teenagers. Jim Bob was 19, Michelle was only 17. They began their life together in the small, close-knit community in northwestern Arkansas, and they got deeply embedded in the conservative Christian world that would eventually come to define every single thing that they did. Early in their marriage, Michelle fell pregnant, but they unfortunately lost that baby, and she and Jim Bob came to believe that the reason for losing that baby was because of the use of birth control. After consulting their pastor, they made a big decision that would change the trajectory of their lives. They would never, ever, ever use contraception again. They would now, quote, let God decide how many children they had. What followed was 19 children born between 1988 and 2009. I'm not 100% sure if I'm pronouncing every single name correctly. I'm trying my best. But Joshua, Jana, John David, Jill, Jessa, Ginger, Joseph, Josiah, Joanna, Jedida, Jeremiah, Jason, James, Justin, Jackson, Johanna, Jennifer, Jordan, Grace, and finally Josie. And the dynamic of their family was a very close-knit one, but very strict. All of the children were homeschooled and had limited access to TV and the internet.
internet. They were also not big on conventional dating. Dating to them looked different, meaning no physical contact before marriage, including kissing, and they pretty much believed that men were above women in every single way. That women belonged completely to their husbands, that daughters belonged completely to their fathers until marriage, that physical discipline of children was not only acceptable but spiritually required, and that a woman's biggest goal, biggest role in life was to please men, essentially. And to their community, they were a model family, but to the outside world, they would become a phenomenon. The Duggar family first appeared on television in September of 2005 in a 1-hour special on the Discovery Health channel titled 14 Children and Pregnant Again. The program introduced America to Jim Bob, his wife Michelle, and their family as they prepared to welcome baby number 15 into the world. The reaction was incredible. Viewers were absolutely fascinated, not only by the sheer scale of the family, but everything that they did and the way that they operated. In other words, they gained fans quickly, so then there were follow-up specials on them, and then the audience just kept growing. So much so that in September of 2008, TLC launched 17 Kids and Counting as a full weekly series. They gave them a show of their own that would eventually change from 17 to 18 Kids and Counting, and then 19 Kids and Counting as Michelle continued to birth babies. Over 10 seasons and 229 episodes, the show averaged 3.2 million viewers, making it one of TLC's most watched programs of all time. And the show was just about the family's daily life, the oldest daughters cooking and caring for the youngest siblings, the relationships, the weddings, the first kisses at the weddings, and the births as the kids got married and started their own families. Jim Bob and Michelle were presented as devoted parents. Their children were polite, helpful, happy. And then the family also became politically active. The eldest son, Josh Duggar, ended up moving to Washington, D.C. to work in politics. Jim Bob ran for Senate in 2002, and for the Arkansas state legislature, the family endorsed political candidates and appeared at campaign events very open about their extremely controversial beliefs. But the point is that they were not just a reality TV family, they kind of transformed to be their own brand. But while America was forming a strong fan base for the Duggar family on television, something deeply troubling had already happened inside of their home, something that Jim Bob and Michelle knew about, dealt with privately, and chose not to disclose to neither law enforcement nor the public for over a decade. In July of 2002, Jim Bob Duggar told the Arkansas State Police in a later report that he had learned that year that his eldest son, Josh, then 14 years old, had expressed extremely disturbing behavior towards a female child, his sister, while she slept. Jim Bob said that he disciplined his son, but he did not call the police, and the behavior did not stop. In March of 2003, he was accused of doing the same thing to other sisters, the same things happening to them, sometimes while they slept, sometimes while they were awake, but on at least 7 different occasions. One saying that she had been standing in the laundry room when Josh walked in and tried to put his hands under her dress. Another particularly disturbing incident involved Josh reading to his then 5-year-old sister as she sat on his lap. He then put his hands in areas that they should never be. She ran out, told her dad. Jim Bob, according to the later police report, then met with church elders and told them what was going on. But still, nobody contacted law enforcement. That same month, Jim Bob and Michelle sent Josh to what they described to be at the time a Christian counseling program in Little Rock. When police later interviewed Michelle about this program, she acknowledged that it was not a legitimate treatment center, saying that Josh had been simply sent away to be with a family friend, where he performed hard physical labor, I guess for 4 months, but he received no professional mental health treatment of any kind. When Josh returned home in July of 2003, Jim Bob and church elders took him to meet with an Arkansas state trooper named Joseph Hutchins, but not because he was in law enforcement. They took him to him because he was strictly a family friend, a personal family friend of the Duggar family, and apparently this state trooper gave Josh what the later police report described to be a very stern talk, but took no official action, filed no report, and made no referral to Child Protective Services. Josh then apologized to the victims, most of which were his sisters, and then that was that. The family considered the matter resolved. Fast forward 4 years to 2007, that state trooper, the family friend Joseph Hutchins, was convicted on CP charges. For that, he is currently serving a 56-year prison sentence. Just an important detail to mention, in my opinion, because the man that Jim Bob Duggar had chosen to give a stern talk to his son turned out to be guilty of disturbing, disgusting behavior himself. Then we get to 2006. The family flies out to be on Oprah Winfrey's show. Everything is going according to plan until production receives an email from a person that is saying, listen, the family is not who you think they are. Josh Duggar has S8, his little sister, amongst other children. The parents know they're hiding it and they are never going to let this information be released to the public. Just thought you should know before you have them on your show. Filming is then canceled. Production takes that email to law enforcement. Turns out law enforcement had received a very similar email claiming the same things, but still, no charges are filed. Then the Duggar family goes on to sign with TLC for their show to air on TV with absolutely no public knowledge of any of the allegations against them. And like I said, in September of 2008, 17 Kids and Counting premieres on TLC with Josh Duggar as a featured cast member, presenting himself to millions of people to be this devoted Christian husband and soon-to-be father. It would not be until 2015 that the information would be made public. By that point, Josh was married and with 4 children of his own. In May of 2015, In Touch magazine publishes the police report, the article that detailed everything. The incidents from 2002, 2003, the victims who were his little sisters, the family response, the inadequate program that Josh was sent to, the meeting with the trooper who would be later convicted of CP, and the extremely disturbing allegations against Josh. It all comes out. Within hours, the Duggar family's carefully constructed public image was in deep trouble. Josh Duggar issued a statement that same day, quote, 12 years ago, as a young teenager, I acted inexclusively. I have since then been humbled and humiliated by the horrific nature of my past conduct. I sought forgiveness from those who I had wronged and asked for and received forgiveness from my parents. We spoke with the authorities where I confessed my wrongdoing, and my parents arranged for me and those affected by my actions to receive counseling, end quote. 3 days later, TLC announced that it was pulling all episodes of 19 Kids and Counting from its schedule. Quote, we are deeply saddened and troubled by this heartbreaking situation, and our thoughts and prayers are with the family and victims at this difficult time, end quote. For that statement, TLC faced an immediate and intense backlash, in part because on the night the story broke, the network had been running a marathon of 19 Kids and Counting episodes. Critics were very quick to point out that the network had been profiting from a family that it clearly fully failed to investigate. Jim Bob and Michelle then sit down for an interview with then Fox News anchor Megyn Kelly for an interview that aired in 2 parts. In said interview, they defended their handling of the situation, described Josh's behavior as a dark and difficult time that had ultimately brought them closer to God. And they expressed frustration that the police report had been made public. Michelle said, quote, we had a situation in our home and we handled it. Our children were safe, end quote. The sisters, who were the victims, also got very upset that the information was now made public. They were, too, openly critical about the decision that was made to release the police report. Quote, I couldn't believe what was going on. I said, what right do you have to do this? We're victims. They can't do this to us, end quote. Then Josh's wife makes a statement saying that this information is, yes, shocking, but not to her because she had already known about this. She found out 2 years after their engagement. But she states that Josh has received counseling that changed his life, saying that he is no longer the person who once essayed his little sisters. TLC officially canceled 19 Kids and Counting on July 16th of 2015. However, 5 months later, TLC launched a new show. It was initially titled Jill and Jessa Counting On, and that show was, I guess, created to give Jill and Jessa, Josh's sisters, a platform to tell their stories in the aftermath of Josh's revelations. But within a few episodes, that show basically became what 19 Kids and Counting had been. It pretty much became a show about the entire Duggar family, their courtships, their weddings, and their babies. Josh was not seen on screen, but everyone else remained. Counting On ran for 11 seasons. It made a lot of money, not only for TLC, but also for the Duggar family. In 2018, Jill and her husband Derek left the show and later publicly revealed that none of the adult children from the Duggar family had ever been paid directly for their appearances on it, saying that all the money from TLC flowed to Jim Bob, who controlled the family's finances. This new revelation then opened a new and deeply uncomfortable conversation about the power that Jim Bob wielded over his entire family. And it was then that a lot of conversations started happening of people beginning to ask questions about what the family dynamic was really like. And people of the public felt really confused as to why this family was being portrayed as genuine and wholesome when in reality they seemed to be a family who lived in a system of manipulation and control. But perhaps the biggest shock came in 2021. On the morning of April 29th of 2021, federal agents from Homeland Security Investigations arrived at Wholesale Motor Cars, a used car dealership in Springdale, Arkansas, owned and operated by Josh Duggar. They seized multiple electronic devices and arrested 33-year-old Josh Duggar. He was taken into custody and held without bond. The charges against him were initially sealed. However, very soon after they were unsealed, and it was revealed that Josh Duggar had been charged with 2 federal counts: receiving CSAM material and possessing CSAM material. The material involved children under the age of 12. Josh pleaded not guilty and was released from custody in May. During that time, he stayed with family and friends, a pastor and his wife, while he awaited trial, under the condition that he had no unsupervised contact with minors. The details that emerged from that federal investigation were devastating, to say the least. In a pre-trial hearing, a special agent from the Department of Homeland Security testified that the material found on a computer belonging to Josh Duggar included files that were among the, quote, top 5 worst I have ever had to examine, end quote, in his 11 years on working on similar cases, including videos of children as young as 18 months old. They were described to be way beyond just disturbing, not only CSAM, but
might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
also child torture. Josh had used some sort of hidden system on his work computer and a peer-to-peer file sharing program to download and view the material, taking significant measures to conceal his activity from the monitoring software the family used. The material found included, quote, 600 or more images. TLC canceled Counting On in June of 2021, 2 months after Josh's arrest. The network then cut all ties with the Duggar family entirely. Josh Duggar's federal trial began in November of 2021. Over 6 days, 10 witnesses testified. The prosecution's argument clearly showing that Josh had deliberately downloaded and distributed CSAM using that software that he installed on his computer and created a password-protected hidden partition for, specifically to hide his activity. Not only that, but Josh had distributed that material to an undercover law enforcement officer. And what was his defense's argument, you may be wondering? Oh, well, they just said that it wasn't true. They just said that it wasn't him. Their main argument was that someone else must have used Josh's computer. Thankfully, in December of 2021, after less than 7 hours of deliberation, the jury found Josh guilty on both counts. He showed absolutely no visible emotion as the verdict was read, and he was sentenced to 151 months. 12 and a half years in federal prison, followed by 20 years of supervised release. His current release date is set for October 2nd, 2032. He will then be 44 years old. And if you think that that is the end of the video, it's not, because in March of 2026, there is another arrest. 31-year-old Joseph Duggar was arrested on March 18th, 2026 and charged with 2 counts, one involving the SA of a victim under 12 years old. He's accused of SAing a 9-year-old girl on multiple times during a family vacation to Panama City Beach, Florida in 2020, quote. Bay County investigators were contacted by a detective regarding a report of past SA. The 14-year-old victim participated in a forensic interview where she disclosed several incidents involving Duggar that occurred during a family vacation in Panama City Beach when she was only 9 years old. According to the Bay County Sheriff's Office, the victim reported that Joseph repeatedly asked her to sit on his lap, sit beside him on a couch, and cover them with a blanket. I think you can put together what he did / tried to do when that was happening. So this girl goes to her dad, tells him what happens. The child's father then confronts Joseph directly about this, and guess what? Joseph admits to it. Not only that, he says that yes, those things happened, even confirming that, quote, his intentions were not pure. Police then had the father call Joseph again, but this time with a detective listening on the line, and then Joseph admits to it a second time. But then he pleads not guilty and he requests a jury trial. So this is a case that's still ongoing. But this is now the second Duggar son in the same family from the same household, raised under the same religious framework, to face serious child SA allegations. But that's still not all, because 2 days after Josh's arrest, 27-year-old Kendra, his wife, was arrested and charged with 4 counts of endangering the welfare of a child and 4 counts of false imprisonment, both in the second degree. Allegedly, when Joseph was arrested, there was a welfare check done on the kids, and it was found allegedly that 2 bedrooms had the locks on the outside of the doors instead of on the inside, suggesting that Kendra, Joseph, or both used those rooms to lock away their kids. They both pleaded not guilty, and these are both still ongoing cases. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that for now. We'll see what happens, but let me know if you guys have heard about this. Let me know if you're keeping up to date on it, and I'm sure I'll make a follow-up video on this. Thank you for spending time with me today. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
So this one right here is must watch. You guys need to listen to this guy. I've mentioned that a lot of times, and I have questions regarding to the whole like funeral homes and cemetery situation. You know, I'm talking about the whole pattern of you passing away and then you getting buried all the way through. That whole project, the whole system is completely flawed, and it's full of questions without answers. So listen to this guy really quick.
This is the second time in 3 months that I've got an empty casket in Nashville, Tennessee. Something has to be done. I've been digging now here for over 2 years, and this is only the second time that I've felt an empty casket. But I did again today. I've contacted the authorities, I've contacted the funeral home, I will be on live tonight to show more info, but please be safe out here and watch who you let bury your loved ones.
So he was actually supposed to go live to, actually even talk about the whole situation and what's been happening to him. And he said this is the second time in 2 years that he actually found an empty grave, an empty casket. And, there was supposed to be people in there, and these bodies actually missing. You guys remember, I've made about 2 or 3 videos about this whole thing. Something is not adding up, and then we are actually tapping into the very, very reason why these caskets are coming up empty in cemeteries. And last thing I said is that we are actually being recycled. I'm talking about our bodies. And a lot of people came forward with how they would lose a friend or a family member, and then they would go to a different city, a different country, and they would actually see this exact person just walking just normally right down the streets, just living life unbothered. And then they would be, that person would be in complete shock. I'm looking at my grandmother, I'm looking at my sister, I'm looking at my friend, I'm looking at my best friend, my coworker. But then it's not. It's literally not. I believe there's a recycling system that's going on in this whole, once you pass away to the second that you actually make it to the cemetery. I believe after a while, I don't know however long, but your body is recycled. And this guy he said that he's supposed to go on live. Hopefully, a lot of people didn't miss his live, so he can actually explain further of what he's been, experiencing when it comes to this situation. But there are too many stories of people coming up on TikTok and anywhere on YouTube, wherever they can actually speak up, asking they demanding answers as to why did my friend who passed away 5 years ago, I'm seeing the same person in a different city, and it's not literally the same person, but same image, same body, same everything, besides their consciousness of who they were or who they are. They live in a whole complete different life. And tell me one thing, and I keep asking you guys, how many times have you driven by a construction area, huge, I'm talking about acres of land, and they're telling you we building a new cemetery in that specific area? None. It's been the same old cemetery since we've been living on Earth. Well, since obviously our generations, to be specific. Name one new cemetery that you've heard of. But yet, we keep burying more people, more, every single day. Literally. We are dropping like flies compared to us being born, living on this earth. So where, these bodies, do they get piled up on each other? Nope. Technically and physically, that can't happen. But the old ones, where do they go? That's the question.
I feel like this case is proof that if you have enough money, you can get away with basically anything. Natalie Wood was born on July 20th of 1938. She was born in San Francisco, California, and her father was an alcoholic and her mother was a stage mom. From the very beginning, her mother was desperate for her to become famous so that she could be a breadwinner, and so she would often take her to audition for roles and stuff like that, even though she was very young. Her mother, Maria, went to a fortune teller who told her that her second child would be a great beauty and she should be aware of dark water. And as you can tell, Natalie was incredibly beautiful and she would become very successful in Hollywood. While she was very successful, her romantic life was kind of rocky. She would have several affairs, and then also dated Elvis Presley before she met and married Robert Wagner at the age of 18. They got married in 1957 and then divorced 5 years later, but eventually they would get back together and remarried in 1972. Natalie's fame did start to wane a little bit, but she was in a movie called Brainstorm with Christopher Walken, and on the set they became very good friends, with some people speculating that they might be more than friends. They had an electricity between them, is what people said, so take that for what you will. On the evening of November 28th of 1981, that weekend, Robert and Natalie, had invited Christopher to get on their yacht with them and go around the Catalina Islands for Thanksgiving, I believe. On November 29th in the morning of 1981, Natalie's body was found about a mile away from their yacht, the Splendor, floating. She was gone. The small dinghy that was attached to the Splendor was found beached on a shore nearby. When police started investigating, they were told that Natalie had gone to bed earlier in the evening, and then Christopher and Robert had stayed up talking a little bit before Robert went to go join Natalie and go to sleep. That's when he realized that both Natalie and the dinghy were gone. Natalie was found at 8 a.m. that morning, and she was found wearing a flannel nightgown, a down jacket, and socks. They did find several bruises on her body, but the medical examiner said it was an accidental drowning and that the bruises proved that the bruises had happened while she was drowning. Now, that was pretty much that at the time. Even though there were rumors kind of floating around that evening, it wasn't until 2011 when the captain of the yacht, Captain Dennis Davern, admitted that he had left out several details to that night. The captain said that weekend had been filled with arguments and there was a lot of tension on the boat that night, with the main argument being that Natalie and Christopher had been flirting. The captain said that Robert had been incredibly jealous of Christopher, and this had gone on all weekend long. Natalie and Christopher had spent hours at a Catalina Island bar, and then Robert showed up and he was furious. After that, they went to dinner at Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant. It was there that they continued to drink, and then employees couldn't recall if it was Christopher or if it was Robert who had thrown a glass against a wall at some point. Then at about 10 p.m., they went back to their dinghy and went back to the Splendor. Now, Christopher did eventually admit to police that there had been a small beef between him and Robert, but it was more along the lines of Natalie being gone for filming and being away from their child. And initially, reports did say that the fight had kind of calmed down and, they went to bed. The captain in 2011 said that they continued drinking while they were on board, and Robert was pretty upset. Allegedly, Robert had broken a wine bottle on a table and had asked Christopher, "Are you trying to F my wife?" The Captain Davern, then says that after this, Christopher went back to his room and that Robert and Natalie soon followed. But it didn't stay quiet because they continued to argue and it came back onto the deck. They continued fighting, and then the captain says that everything went quiet. Now, again, this is alleged because we don't have proof of it. The captain went to go check to see what was going on, and only Robert was on the deck. And he said, "Natalie is missing." Then, allegedly, Robert told Captain Davern to go look for Natalie, and that's when they realized that the dinghy was missing. And Robert said that she must have taken it. But now, the captain knew that Natalie was terrified of water. This is something I forgot to mention. She was absolutely terrified of water, and he said there was no way she would have taken that out by herself. The captain wanted to turn the floodlights on to look for Natalie, but Robert refused. He said he didn't want to draw any attention to what was going on, which is kind of strange. Allegedly, of course. Now, that same night, there was a couple who was in a boat 80 feet away, and they said at about 11 p.m. they heard a woman screaming that she was drowning. Now, there was another yacht that was close by, and so they were throwing a huge party on this other yacht, and so they thought that maybe this was just something going on over there and it was a joke, so that's why they didn't call police. Now, Robert did eventually call somebody. He called somebody at 1:30 a.m., so this would have been several hours after the captain said that he had heard what he had heard at 11 p.m. And 11 p.m. is roughly when the neighboring yacht heard a woman screaming that she was drowning. Now, Natalie's family thinks that it is very strange that she was found the way that she was, because she would have never been seen out in the open wearing a nightgown. Nobody also believes the fact that Natalie would have gone out onto the dinghy by herself, because she was so horribly afraid of water. And it wouldn't be until 2011 that her accidental drowning was turned into a drowning and undetermined factors. This case has been opened again, and they're still looking into it, but considering it happened so long ago, I wonder if they'll ever find any real answers. So what are your thoughts on it? Let me know down in the comments, and follow for more true crime.